Ever since I was 6 years old, I was fascinated by roller coasters. I loved everything about them, for the type of track, design of trains, color schemes, and even the noises that they make. Surprisingly, I was also afraid to ride roller coasters. Beyond riding a few kiddie coasters, you couldn't convince me to ride anything bigger. I have countless stories of me waiting in line with my family only to back out at the very last second. There were a couple times when I actually sat down in the train, but only found myself jumping out before any of the restraints could be set. Well, finally when I turned 13, my family and I took a trip to Dorney Park. It was the weekend after Labor Day, so the park was pretty dead. I built up enough courage to ride Thunderhawk, the park's classic wooden coaster that was built in 1924. I remember once the train pulled into the station, I was ecstatic. I was literally telling everyone that I just rode my first coaster. I was super proud of myself. When I think back to this moment, everyone else must have thought that I was crazy or something. To them, they couldn't see what the big deal was, but to me, it was monumental. Even though I finally rode a big roller coaster, well, that's if you consider Thunderhawk to be a big roller coaster, I was still afraid to ride other roller coasters. In fact, during that same trip, I refused to ride Laser, Hercules, and of course, Steel Force. I simply spent a good hour or more just marathoning Thunderhawk. To me, it was the greatest roller coaster on the planet. I must have ridden it about 25 times that day. I knew every dip, bend, bump by the time the day was over. Fast forward to the following year, I took a trip with some friends to Knoebels. It was during this trip that I really shattered through some barriers and became a full-fledged coaster enthusiast. After spending about a half of the day wandering around the park, riding every thrill attraction except the roller coasters, I finally decided to go ride Phoenix. It blew me away, and I was ready to ride it over and over again. Since I conquered Phoenix, I thought it was time to take a spin on a looping roller coaster, so we headed over to the now defunct Whirlwind. The ride only lasts 10 seconds, but to me, I was loving every moment. Whirlwind is a tame coaster, especially with today's standards, but it was the first time to take me upside down. Well, now that I conquered Phoenix and Whirlwind, I was ready to ride Twister, Knoebels' other wooden coaster. When I got up near the station, I became really hesitant and almost backed out. But once we got into the station and was about to board, I reluctantly hopped on and strapped in. Twister became my new favorite roller coaster. I mean, it was only competing against 3 other roller coasters, but this thing was legit. It was fast, intense, and also the tallest roller coaster that I've ever ridden. My friends and I marathoned this roller coaster until it was time to leave for the day. Now, I was completely hooked on roller coasters, no more just researching and watching from the ground. I was up there with everyone else, screaming in pure euphoria. Just a few short weeks later, I took a journey to Six Flags Darien Lake with some family and friends. Finally, I was at the big games, I thought. I rode every roller coaster, but in sequential order, from small to large, well, sort of. Starting off with Viper, then Predator, Boomerang, then over to Superman, Ride of Steel, which I was once again terrified to ride. I mean, that same year I finally rode a roller coaster that was over 100 feet. Now I was about to ride a roller coaster over 200 feet. I actually closed my eyes during the whole lift hill, but ended up loving it. I remember trying to give my friend a high five at the bottom of the drop, but since I was so excited, I think I accidentally hit her in the head. The final coaster of the trip was Mind Eraser. I was finally ready to ride a suspended roller coaster. I really loved Mind Eraser. I mean, who was I to know that SLCs were garbage back then? But anyways, I thought it was a great ride. Now, there was truly no roller coaster that I was afraid to ride. I mean, even now, I get anxious before riding some roller coasters, which honestly is a good thing. I love feeling a little terrified before strapping in. That way it makes the experience that much better. In 2016, I rode Intimidator 305 for the first time, and I remember being a little nervous for a few weeks prior to even riding the coaster. It's amazing to me how long it took me to finally overcome my fear of riding a roller coaster. You'd think that someone who loved everything else about the things would also want to experience them, but I was scared. I let my emotions get the better part of me. I remember praying the night before riding Thunderhawk for the courage to actually ride one, and what an accomplishment to finally follow through. Looking back, I think the biggest thing that scared me about roller coasters was the fear of not liking it. I was afraid that the ride would prove to be too much for me and thus be a terrifying experience. I was never really afraid of being thrown out since I basically knew everything there was about the ride. No, I was afraid of that butterflies in your stomach feeling. Who would have thought that now I crave to feel that sensation? It's funny how things come full circle. Well, that's my story for today. Were you afraid to ride roller coasters at one point in your life? Or maybe you still are afraid to ride? Let me know all about it in the comments below. Please like this video if you enjoyed the content, and also make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more great content coming your way by XscreamThrills.